We now present For the Record.
Just ahead, one election done, and the biggest one still to come here in Wisconsin.
And it bodes very, very well for a big change on April 4th.
So I think for both parties, everyone's going to be at the barricades on this thing. And I'm confident Dan Kelly can get elected.
Plus, Ukrainians in Dane County reflect on a heartbreaking anniversary.
For me, it's like one day that lasts forever.
Welcome to For the Record. I'm Naomi Coles. Wisconsin has what many call the most important race in the entire nation this year, where the Supreme Court election in April has the potential to flip the balance of our high court, a change that could transform politics in the state. This week, the primary election narrowed the candidates down to liberal-backed Janet Protasiewicz and former Justice, conservative-backed Dan Kelly. I am joined first by Democratic Party Chair Ben Wickler to break down the results. Ben, good morning. You're feeling pretty good today?
Good morning, Naomi. I'm feeling very good because what happened on Tuesday shows that across Wisconsin, in rural areas, suburbs, cities alike, people who think that abortion should be a question of personal freedom and not something that far-right judicial activists, ultra-mega extremists in judicial robes rip away from people who believe that this is about freedom are casting ballots, and it bodes very, very well for a big change on April 4th.
Ben, I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that your good mood this morning is kind of based on Janet Protasiewicz taking more votes than both the conservative candidates combined, and that's not even accounting yet for her, the second runner-up for the liberal backside, Everett Mitchell. Am I kind of on point there?
That's exactly right. But I will also say it's buoyed by the fact that turnout soared. This was a 34% jump relative to the previous record in a February primary. That means that people are paying attention. Normally, most voters just tune out these spring elections, even when the stakes are really high. This year is an exception to that. And the fact about this race is that the more people know about it, the more they know about how this is as close as we'll get to Kansas's abortion referendum, the more they know that fair maps, gerrymandering, democracy, voting rights, the removing the threat of overturning the 2024 presidential election, the more they know that all that is on the line, the more likely they are to vote for Janet Protasiewicz and against Dan Kelly. So the fact that people are tuning in is itself, to me, a huge indicator of hope in terms of changing the makeup of this court.
Let's talk about Dan Kelly for a second. He lost his, he was an appointee to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. He lost his statewide election back in, a couple years ago. Is his win over Waukesha County Judge Jennifer Dorow what Dems were perhaps hoping for in a general opponent?
But when you look at the GOP, there's a kind of ongoing civil war where Republicans debate, should they try to nominate the more electable person or the more extreme person? And once again, the Wisconsin Republican electorate has gone for the ultra-mega extreme candidate. Dan Kelly was involved in the fake elector scheme to try to overthrow the 2020 presidential election. He's been cashing checks from the GOP even while he was a candidate in December of 2022, most recently. This is not someone who can lay any claim to giving questions that come before the court a fair, impartial hearing. And yet the GOP, I guess that's what the Republican Party super donors at least want. His whole TV presence over these last few weeks was bankrolled by the biggest Republican mega billionaires in the country. He didn't spend a dime of campaign money on it because he knew the special interests would fund those ads. I don't think that's what voters are looking for in the Supreme Court.
The line of messaging that Republicans seem to be taking now going into the April election against Judge Protasiewicz is the message that she's soft on crime. They launched a website against her this week. There's a big message there that they're pushing. Is she soft on crime? What would be your response on that?
Janet Protasiewicz was a prosecutor for 25 years, and she served on the bench for 9 years. She's adjudicated thousands of cases, and she's ensured that serious criminals who pose a threat to their community are serving appropriate time. Now, Republicans like to cherry pick cases, but they don't seem to have an answer for the fact that Dan Kelly decided to make his money by getting child sex predators off easy, making sure that they actually didn't serve time. That's how he made his money as a criminal defense attorney. That's not something you can find in Janet Protasiewicz's background because she is a lifelong public servant. So there's a real contrast here, someone who takes public safety very seriously in Janet Protasiewicz, and someone who thinks that it is a political tool that they can use to get power for the ultra-mega wing of the Republican Party. That's what you get with Dan Kelly.
Ben, as always, thank you so much for joining the show. Thanks again for, bringing us your breakdown of what happened on Tuesday. Coming up in a minute, I spoke earlier this week to Ben's counterpart over on the state Republican Party, state chair Brian Schimming. That interview is right up next. I'm continuing our post-election conversation now. We're turning to Wisconsin's Republican State Party chair. That's Brian Schimming. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
I want to start with the obvious question. Dan Kelly now faces Janet Protasiewicz, who got more votes than both Kelly and his conservative opponent, Jennifer Dorow, combined. So how does he overcome that?
Well, it should be no surprise because out-of-state groups came in and poured millions of dollars in behind Janet Protasiewicz, number one, and attacking the two conservative candidates in the primary. So that didn't surprise me at all that she did that well. And frankly, I'm not that concerned about it. But I do think it'll be a close race. We've had 10 races in this state in the last 22 years, in this state of 6 million people, that have been decided by less than 30,000 votes. So I think for both parties, everyone's going to be at the barricades on this thing, and I'm confident Dan Kelly can get elected.
It's kind of an open secret, though. The Democrats wanted Dan Kelly to win. He was their preferred opponent in the general April race. I mean, he's already lost a statewide election. Why coalesce behind someone who's already lost once?
Well, he lost a statewide election just coincidentally on the day that this Democratic presidential primary was in Wisconsin as well, which would have been tough for any conservative to win that election. So I don't put a lot of stock in those numbers, but Dan Kelly's been working the state for years between his last campaign and this one, and our confidence level is high. I will tell you, our grassroots are behind him. Judge Dorow endorsed him here in the last 48 hours. I talked to her again today. She's fully supportive of Dan Kelly. Our folks will come together. I'm really confident of that.
Any big takeaways from the county-by-county results that you saw play out on Tuesday night?
Not a lot of big takeaways. I would say early vote will probably be a little bit more important in this spring, not just because I'm not going to leave that field to the Democrats anymore. All over this state and media interviews, I've talked about the importance of conservatives early voting for two reasons. Number one, get the votes in the bank, get it done. But number two, there are a lot of people, folks that are watching us right now, who know 10, 20, 30, 40 people who vote in presidential years, vote in gubernatorial years, but don't vote in off years. A lot of those folks are our people, and my job is to get to every center-right voter in the state and get them out. And if it's by early vote or by showing up on Election Day, we're going to do both.
Just today, we're taping this on Thursday afternoon. Your party, the Wisconsin Republican Party, put out a website attacking Janet Protasiewicz on issues. And it seems to me the winning message you believe is going to be a soft-on-crime issue. Is it not for Dan Kelly? Well, it would be a soft-on-crime issue because Janet Protasiewicz is soft on crime. I mean, she comes from a city of Milwaukee where only 40% of the felony, 40% of the crimes are charged as felonies. And she is not only a judge, but a former ADA as well. And so we're going to look at Janet Protasiewicz's total record, not just what she says, but her total record. And I think when voters understand the differences between the way she's acted as a judge and an ADA and Dan Kelly will win the election. Last question for you. Initially, Democrats were a bit ahead in fundraising. They've been working this race since the last race, right? Republicans seem to be playing a little bit of catch-up in terms of fundraising for this. Is that so?
I will say this to you, and the Democrats have done a very good job fundraising, especially from out-of-state, millions of dollars from individual out-of-state interests. But I will tell you, having just been state party chair for about 2 months here, but our fundraising is going very, very well. It's a large part of my time, as it always would be for a state chair, and it's been going very, very well. And so we're going to put up some good numbers. Can I fight Hollywood millions of dollars? Maybe not, but we'll have the money we need to get this done.
Brian, thanks so much for coming on. I will see you after April.
So good to see you.
So good to see you. All right, we will be right back.